Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bookish Love with Krystal. Today I have with me author Tom Fowler. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I am glad that I got to have you on because trying to schedule with everybody has been a little hectic, but I appreciate you taking your time and, coming on and having a conversation. Now,
Absolutely.
so what kind of got you started in writing?
I'm I guess I'm one of those people who's been doing it for a very long time. Like even when I was a kid, I was at my grandparents' house a lot and I'm dating myself with these references here, but they would be watching shows like The Rockford Files and things like that. So at the time I was probably about 7 or so, I said, well, I've watched enough of these shows. Clearly, as a 7-year-old, I can write something like this. So I wrote a murder mystery, and the scare quotes are really necessary um, because no one actually died. So I was far too polite at 7 years old to kill someone on the page. Everyone recovered from their injuries quite nicely in the hospital. And I identified well, I guess I can't call him the killer because he didn't actually kill anybody. The stabber, because that's what he did, in like the first paragraph or two. So not a
Nice.
mystery, not a mystery either. So 0 for 2 on the murder mystery count. But it was yeah, I was 7. That's going to be my defense. Um, but I think that kind of gave me the bug that never really went away. I wasn't constantly writing stuff after that, but stuff I've come back to over the years, more seriously, before I started publishing 7 years ago. But I think I got the bug early on, and it just never really left me.
Nice. Did you have, like, an author that you kinda, like, gravitated to, like, their books that were also in that category, or just, like, no, it was all just thanks to these TV shows?
It's at the time. Oh God, I couldn't tell you what I was reading when I was 7. I mean, wow. But over time that's changed. I was big into like Stephen King and that kind of those kind of stories for a while. I read most of Anne Rice's books. I guess probably like just after college, like when I was in my 20s, I would say.
Mhm.
At least all the ones that were out then. Um, I moved into like more, I guess what you might say is more traditional, like epic fantasy. So I read a lot of things by like the Wheel of Time series and books by R.A. Salvatore. And, a while ago, I started gravitating more towards mysteries and thrillers, kind of like, the Rockford Files when I was 7. And in that vein, I've picked up quite a few authors I like. Lawrence Block, Robert B. Parker, Sue Grafton, Lee Child. A lot of the people who are who have produced or are still producing books that a lot of people like to read.
Oh, nice. Well, so, my grandmother is actually she has every single Stephen King's work,
Oh,
including the
nice.
ones under his pen name,
Hmm.
and I was just like, "This is a thing?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And, like, she's very proud of this, and because of she was my start to love, but she also had Dean Koontz everywhere as well. So
Mm-hmm.
Dean Koontz, James Patterson, and she's just like, "One of these days you will get into this." And I'm just like, "Maybe. I could see that." But Stephen King, I agree. I've kind of dove into actually, I think my first introduction with Stephen King was
Hmm.
It, and that was
Nice.
back when it was
Yeah.
aired on TV, and I
Hmm.
nobody knew I watched it. I was hiding behind my grandmother's recliner watching it because I was God. It was well after because I think it came out in what, 90? Look at
Around there, something like that.
Yeah, I was like 3. Like,
Hmm.
I was a kid when I saw it,
Yeah.
which, it is what it is. But, so I always wonder because I don't get to talk to many authors who write in the thriller and crime fiction genre like you do. So I'm like, hey, like, do you when you research, are you ever afraid that the FBI is going to look at your research files and be like, oh, watch list, this one, yes.
Um, maybe a little bit. But
I
yeah, I don't do a lot of like elaborate things. I don't have to search for like, I don't search for like exotic poisons or, how do I hide a body or something like that. So hopefully they're leaving me alone.
None of the obvious ones.
Right, right.
So I talked to one person and they were like, "Yeah, no, they probably have seen me because I asked, how much blood it would take to fill up a bathtub." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, well, that would probably do it."
Yeah.
Um, but so you said you've published your first book about 7 years ago. Were you self-published or did you get picked up by a traditional publishing house?
I started indie. I've more or less stayed that way. But this was God, October of 2017 is when I published the first one, so almost 7 years now.
Nice.
And I mean, getting it, I know I had a first draft finished at some time in 2010, because at a Christmas party in November, early December of 2010, my date for the Christmas party, who would later be my wife, read a copy of that first draft. So I know I had it back then. So 7 years out, I had a copy of the book. And at some point, I decided I needed to stop noodling with it and get like a professional's eyes on it. And I think that's really what motivated me to get it out there into the world at that point. Well,
That's
at that point,
awesome.
7 years later,
Yeah. Well, so I don't think it was as easy to self-publish back in like the early 2010s as it has been over the last several years. So I think you waiting was kind of perfect.
Yeah, yeah, there are a lot more resources out now than there were in 2017, and there were a lot more in 2017 than there were in, 2010 or 2012.
Yeah.
The gold rush, so to speak, was over by 2017, but there were a ton of resources out there that people just didn't have, 5 years prior to that. And of course, there's even more out there now.
Yeah, do you find it hard like when you do your covers, do you search out like people or do you have like one specific person that you work with?
I have a couple designers I use, that generally work pretty often in the crime fiction and thriller spaces.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And did you just find them by random or
Um, Recommendations, I guess. Other people I know have used them and have had good luck with them, and the covers on those books look great. So I wouldn't mind to look good too. I am very much not an artist, so designing my own covers is not going to be a thing for me. Like if you gave me two dots, I might be able to draw a straight line between them. Like I am very much not an artist. I know my limitations. So I am very happy to outsource that.
now, in total, how many books do you think that's like published and non-published do you think you have
Oh
written?
God. If we're counting the all the non-published stuff that will probably never see the light of day, over 30.
Oh, wow,
Um,
okay. Now, is that with the ones that won't see the light of day, is it just because you personally just didn't like them or
they were long enough ago that I think my current writing has evolved a lot since then. And it's not that I couldn't use those stories and maybe like rewrite them. Like, God, it was probably 20 years ago now. This is probably 2003, 2004. I wrote a couple of spy thrillers, which are probably terrible if I read them today. But the story, like I could take the stories and probably just redo them,
Yeah.
and just rewrite them, with everything I've learned in the last 20 years, and hopefully they'd be a lot better. But like as they exist, I will not publish them, but I might use those stories at some point.
No, that was the one I always ask because I know for myself personally, I have a couple notebooks that I have
Hmm.
now that all have like ideas. I when I was a kid, I used to collect. I was a notebook hoarder because, we didn't have the internet was dial up and none of us could stand hearing that
Right.
stupid sound. So I wrote everything out on books and it's funny I started out writing fan fiction with
Hmm.
my friend and we used to take this notebook and I'd write a chapter and in between classes, we'd, like, pass it off to each other,
That's awesome.
and we noticed our level of, mental breakdowns as we were writing, and it was funny because we wrote it more like script form,
Mm.
and I just found it, like, 3 days
Oh
ago,
wow.
and I sent a text to her, and she was like, I don't remember that person because she wrote up in the corner, like, whoever her current boyfriend was at the time,
Uh-huh.
and she wrote as, like, "I heart so and so," and she's like, "Yeah, I don't even remember who that is," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's" we and it was funny because you go back and you find stuff like that, and it's just like, "Okay, that's cool." I went back and found a couple of my other stories, and I was like, I could actually make that work." So, but I'm like, now I have material if I want to go back
Hmm.
and redo it, but I wonder, how many authors truly don't actually go back to their previous stuff and are just like, it may see the light of day within my household, but never outside.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, because certainly, like with anything, the more you write, the better you should get. So something you wrote 5, 10, 20 years ago is not going to be up to the standards you would have today, let's say. But yeah, you could take some of those things and say, well, okay, I'm not going to publish this because I wrote it 15 years ago and I'm a much better writer now. But this story, the basic story is good. So you could take, you could take that and work with it. One of the earliest books I wrote in my mystery series, I never published. But I took the basic story and I turned it into a novella and I did publish that. I was able to use some of what I had there, but I probably wrote or rewrote, gosh, at least more than half of it. But I was able to repurpose some of what I had. Like the whole thing itself just wasn't, I didn't think it was good enough.
Yeah.
So I repurposed it. I think when you generate things like that, when you generate content that you can reuse in some other form as a short story, a novella, whatever, yeah, make it easy on yourself. You don't always have to come up with something brand new.
I feel like I noticed recently there's been a lot of like retellings of previous stories,
Hmm.
but you never see much retellings of like thrillers. Or even, like, with spy novels, like, you don't
Hmm.
really see, like, nobody's rewriting Tom Clancy,
Right.
nobody's rewriting, Jack Reacher, nobody's rewriting The Hunt for Red October,
Hmm.
and but it's funny because there's a lot of, like, good material there that they could have arced from. Because
Yeah.
for one, I grew up on The Hunt for Red October. I didn't get the book until 2015, just
Hmm.
because I could never find it. It was actually gifted to me. But I mean, that's what made me fall in love with Sean Connery and Tim Curry,
Right.
you know? And it was funny because I actually got my first introduction to Tim Curry when I was 3. And
Hmm.
that was with Pebble and the Penguin. And most people have no idea what that movie even is, but I'm just like, Tim Curry had a voice for everything, And then when I got older and I realized, holy crap, he was the clown that gave me nightmares.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, no, this man he's the bane of my nightmares, but also like the voice of my dreams.
Yeah, I think I probably saw the movie The Hunt for Red October at least a dozen times. One of my favorite movies. I probably saw it a dozen times before I ever read the book.
Yeah, same. But it's because but like stuff like that is so good
Hmm.
and it stayed close to the source material.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I will say that I'm very I don't know about you, but I'm a stickler. If something's coming from, like, a book
Hmm.
and it gets translated to film, I feel like if you divert too much from the source material, it's not the same book anymore. It's not the same premise.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do like an exact,
Mhm.
porting it over exactly because film or TV, it's a different medium than books.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have, there are some differences you probably have to have in there. But yeah, I agree. I think it needs to kind of walk the line closely to the source material as much as possible, given the differences in format and stuff like that.
Yeah. Would you ever want to see one of your books done in film or in TV?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, Michael Connolly, who's written a ton of mystery books, and probably maybe is best known today for writing the Bosch and Lincoln Lawyer books that have been popular on streaming services. But he wrote the book Bloodwork that got made into a movie. Oh God, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago with Clint Eastwood in the title
Mhm.
role. And apparently he didn't like it, or the
Oh,
story, as the story goes, he did not like the adaptation. But his comment was, once you accept money, and I'm paraphrasing here, once you
yeah.
accept money to adapt your story, you lose control of it.
Yeah.
And that, yeah. So would I like to see it? Yes. Would I like to see it in a completely weird, unrecognizable adaptation? No.
Yeah.
But once I take the money, I don't have the control of it anymore.
So, and that also makes me wonder how Stephen King manages to have a say in pretty much all of his stuff. It's like, do you accept the money up front or does he just take a percentage from things? Because I mean, I would love to pick his brain, but I know there's no way he would answer my messages.
Yeah. Well, he's also Stephen King. And, when you're Stephen
Exactly.
King or, J.K. Rowling or someone like some James Patterson, one of these huge name authors, the rules are a little different. So if you're going to adapt a Stephen King story, he's probably got like a producer's credit or something like that on it. So
Yeah,
I'm
he
sure he has input.
see you say that I would have to say out of you know and the words just went poof right out of my head. Ah. Yeah, no, it's gone. That whole sentence was gone. It was about Stephen King, and it just went right out my ear. That's fantastic. The headphones are supposed to keep the thoughts in, not out.
Right.
Um, who would you consider your Mount Rushmore of
Oh,
authors
oh God.
that inspired you? Who is your Mount Rushmore?
Oh, wow. Um, let's say Robert B. Parker, who wrote best known for probably writing the Spencer Mysteries and Jesse Stone books, which have been turned into a TV series in the 80s and TV movies later. Um, and he died in God 2010, 2011, something like that. But
Oh,
his books have been popular enough that other authors have continued those series. Like all his series are still going on.
oh wow.
They're written by other authors now, but the characters endure.
Hmm.
So like if you can create a character like that who transcends you basically, who outlives you, I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah,
So
that is awesome.
his estate still gets regular money because there's a new Spencer book every year. There's a new Jesse Stone book every year. You know, they're still getting, and of course they're still getting money, I'm sure, from all the old ones that sell. But you know, how
Yeah,
awesome is that to have these enduring characters who even survive you? So yeah,
that's
he would be
awesome.
on there. Um, I would say Lawrence Block, who wrote a lot of mysteries, also on there. Oh, God. I think Sue Grafton, the Alphabet Mysteries, really showcased how a private investigator can work. And she made up the town of Santa Teresa. It was based on Santa Barbara, but like it was even a fictional setting.
Mhm.
So I think that's really cool. And Lee Child for the Jack Reacher books,
Mhm.
because and just they're so hugely popular.
Mhm.
And
There.
even though he's transitioning them over to his brother, but the books still are tremendously popular. Now there's an Amazon series, so they're going to
Mhm.
remain popular for a while, I'm sure.
I think that's another one that where, like you said, it's gonna end up transcending him,
Right.
you know? But, I'm glad you were able to take that hot seat question and just go with it, like, I like that. Normally, most people just go, "Oh, no," and just it kinda shuts down.
Yeah, it's tough. I could have a second Mount Rushmore, I'm sure, if I thought about it for a minute, but if we're sticking to four, that's who I would go with.
Nice. I have to say that growing up Stephen King is, like, number 1 on my top, like, yeah,
Hmm.
coming back into reading after I took a break from, like, hardcore reading for quite a few years just because of, like, my own mental,
Hmm.
issues, but then I started reading again, and I'm just like, Stephen King still is, like, my number 1. I'd have to say he's the point. He did an interview, not too long ago with, George R. R. Martin, and they were asking George asked him, "How do you get a book out as
Hmm.
frequently as you do?" And his simple response is, he writes at least, I think he said 4 pages.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter if he likes them or not, he just puts it out, and ever since I saw that interview, I was like, "You know what? That's what I'm doing."
Yeah.
So, would you consider yourself like, do you have like, when you're writing, do you have like a deadline of how many pages you want to have done in a day, how many words you want to have done in a day, or do you just kind of just let it go?
I usually try to have a weekly word count goal. I don't always go by day because, I have a day job, a family, and others. So it's hard to say, oh, I must write 2,000 words a day because some days
Yeah.
that's just not possible.
No, it's
Um,
really not.
yeah. And so I try to say I'm going to write a certain number of words per week. And that is usually 12 or 13,000 a week.
Oh, that's good. And do you
About
always,
12,000 normally. Yeah.
do you normally hit that goal or?
I normally come close when I'm in production mode. Right now, I'm finalizing revisions for the book that's coming out in March. But once that's done, then I'll be in production mode for something new. And at that pace, I try to turn around a first draft in 5 to 6 weeks. So,
Nice.
and I send it to my editor in chunks. So once I'm finished, he's normally finished, within a week after me. So yeah, I've refined this over time. I used to send him the whole book at once, then I would have to wait. And it's like, okay, well, this is inefficient because, if I'd
Yeah.
sent him, the first half of the book, I would have had that done before now. So now I get 6, 9 chapters. He likes to work in threes for whatever reason. He sends me back 3 chapters at a time. So I send them to him now in multiples of three. So 6, 9, whatever, I send them off.
Oh, well, that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and so now instead of waiting a few weeks after the book for him to finish, now I'm waiting, a few days for him to catch up with the last batch I sent. It's made the process a lot more efficient.
Oh, now when you found your editor, did you was it somebody that was recommended to you? Is it some like how did you find your editor?
I He was actually credited in a book that I read and enjoyed, and I can't remember the name of the book, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I like the book and the author, and I do this too now. Credited her cover artist and her editor, I think in the back of the book. Maybe it was the front, I don't know, but there was credits or acknowledgments or whatever. And
Hmm.
I was like, huh, okay, well, I need an editor, and this book seemed like it was well edited. Um, so I reached out, and yeah, I think you should always try to find a few, and especially editors who work in whatever your genre is. If you're writing thrillers, you should not necessarily get someone who only edits romance and vice versa, because you want someone who knows the ins and outs of your genre and the tropes and things like that and how a story should unfold.
Hmm.
Um, so I found, I guess, three editors I sent sample chapters to, and most of them will give you a chapter or 3,000 words or whatever as a sample. And you really have to see if that person is going to work for you. It's they're working for you basically, and you
Hmm.
need to see if that arrangement's going to work out. And I like the way he did things. He told me some things I was doing well, and he was very candid in telling me some things I was not doing well. And it's like, well, that's what I want. I don't want someone who's going to say, "Oh, yes, yes, this
Yes.
book is great,"
You don't want a yes man.
Right, exactly. I want someone who says, "No, this doesn't work, and you should change it, and this is the way you can do it instead." And that's what we've done. I've been lucky enough to work with the same editor for going on 7 years now, for
Oh,
both my
wow.
series. He does them all, and yeah,
So he probably feels like that's like it's his baby too now,
yeah, yeah,
considering, how long it's been.
yeah, and it's certainly working with him has certainly made my first drafts tighter and cleaner.
Mhm.
His rates don't go down even though he has less to do now for my books, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's improved my writing a lot just working with an editor. It's tremendous.
See, that's now so the way you make it sounds that you've been working with this guy since you started. So like you've always used an editor.
Yeah, I think we are most blind to our own mistakes. I reread, reread. I can't even say that. That draft of my first mystery novel, I don't know how many times. I'm sure I glossed over the same mistakes or the same bad prose or whatever
Hmm.
every time and just didn't recognize it and didn't fix it. And I've been in writing groups where I point things out in other people's stories that I don't see in my own.
Yeah.
And you can use Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid and things like that. And they're certainly better than just reading it yourself. But I think it's good to have a professional human's eyes on the product, on
Yeah.
the book, and just to make it the best you can get it.
I love how you emphasize human eyes on that. I
Yeah.
really do, because there are a lot of things out there that people are like starting to use AI to do editing, and it's just it's sad. When it comes down to it, it's like, all right, well, that you just took money away from somebody. You just took, I don't know. I'm not big on the whole AI kick. I get why some
Hmm.
people would use it, but it's just stick with the human aspect of everything because, it's better to have a conversation with somebody than to look at a computer screen.
Yes.
So I want to jump into you have a book release for Backfire on
Hmm.
March 18th.
Yes.
Are those already available for pre-order? If
Hmm.
not, when will they be available?
Yeah. Backfire is available. That series is published wide, so it's available in every ebook retailer.
Okay, cool.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Kobo, Google Play,
Now, what
Smashwords, I think even. Yeah.
I was gonna say, what is Kobo? Because I noticed a couple people were telling me about that. I've never even heard of it.
Kobo I think they still are a Canadian company. They're owned by Rakuten now. This is a
Okay.
Japanese company, but they started out as a Canadian company. They're still based in Canada. And they're an ebook publisher. They now do audiobooks and things like that too, but they make their own devices, Kobo e-readers, which are very, very good.
Mhm.
And they're another sales channel. They have this a subscription program called Kobo Plus, which is available in many countries in the world. I guess it's kind of like Kindle Unlimited. You can think of it that way, except
Mhm.
as an author, it does not require you to be exclusive to their platform.
Ah.
So you can publish everywhere and still be in Kobo Plus. The way you get paid is a little bit different than Kindle Unlimited. It's based on reading time versus pages. But since they've expanded Kobo Plus, my Kobo income has certainly gone up, and I think I make as much, maybe even more some months from Kobo Plus than I do from sales on Kobo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, though, that's good because I know there's plenty of authors, not just me, that had no idea like what Kobo was. Because I've seen it before. People are like, oh, Kobo this. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And like I guess, like I said, I'm new to this.
Hmm.
I've only published one book myself, and for me, I did everything myself. Minus the cover.
Hmm.
I paid a company to do that because I was like, all right, well, here, take my money,
Right.
And it's so like I didn't know. Everybody's like, oh yeah, Amazon, Amazon, Amazon. I'm like, all right, well, and then I saw KU and I was like, okay, so I have to exclusively be with them. All right. Oh, they give you a free ISBN. All right, for now, I'll use that until I get my own, which
Hmm.
luckily Backfire does a really good job at making them affordable for like multiples.
Yeah.
So that's a plus. But so back to the story. What would you say Backfire is about for somebody who's just picking it up to read?
Well, it is the seventh book in my John Tower thriller series. I write the series so that you can pretty much come in anywhere, like all the stories stand alone. There are recurring characters you'll meet throughout the books, but you can start with, book four or book six or book seven as what's coming out and not feel lost. So Tyler discovers that someone is targeting members of his former Green Beret unit. He's a retired soldier, a retired Green Beret, and currently owns a classic car shop. That's all the titles in the series relate to, not just the plot, but to cars and driving in some way.
Oh,
Um, so he's not an investigator, but he tries to look into it. He has a little bit of help along the way. It's actually related to something that happened in book three when he busted up a trafficking ring. You don't have to read book three to get it, because that's the events of it are kind of mentioned. That I think you'll get the reference if you haven't read book three. And then he has to confront both of the man who is doing the killings and also his benefactor.
oh, nice. See, that sounds like fun, and I like the fact that you said you make it to where you literally can jump in anywhere. Because I think with a lot of series, you can't do that. You have to read the previous books.
Yeah, in some ways, I think it's genre dependent. Like mysteries and thrillers, in mystery, it's usually like, in TV, we would call like the case of the week. It's the
Hmm.
case of the book. Once the book is over, that case is over. And, yeah, you might meet some recurring characters along the way. But if you haven't read any of the previous books, you might say, well, who's this person or who's this person? But
Yeah.
what I do, and what I think most authors do in this space, is briefly mention who the person is and a short description. We don't have to have a page of, you know, this is Bob, and I grew up with Bob, and when we were 10, we both fell off our bikes, and don't stop the story,
Yeah.
just mention briefly who the character is and what their relationship is to the main character, and keep going. And I think it's very easy to orient readers that way. Now, like in fantasy, like if you start the Lord of the Rings series with the second book, you're going to have no idea what's going on.
Yep.
And I think that's very true in a lot of speculative fiction genres.
Hmm.
That it's an ongoing series, and the one book builds on the previous one, and that's how, until you reach a trilogy or however many books are in the series.
Yeah.
Um, but at least in mystery and thriller, every story is more or less a standalone. Most series are constructed that way, that you can pretty much jump in at any point.
Oh, that's cool. I think fantasy should have something like that too. Because yeah, I mean, we have our standalone books,
Hmm.
but a lot of them, the book before builds it up. Like for my book, I mean, you could jump into the second one without reading the first one. You won't know anything of what's happening with certain characters, but I touch on a little bit. But it's also like, no, everything was started in that book, and now it's slowly progressing.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I started off reading Dragonlance as a
Hmm.
kid, and I started off with it was Dragons of Autumn Twilight.
Yes.
And I read all three books
Hmm.
that came in the trilogy set, but there was a fourth solo book that was sold separately.
Hmm.
And I got so upset because it doesn't fit in with my box and it's a little
Uh-huh.
bit taller.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? And it
Dragons of
frustrated
Summer
me.
Flame.
Yes. I'm so glad somebody else gets it. I've only talked to
Yes.
one other
And,
person.
and it was not as good as the first three.
No, it wasn't. And I had the same issue with the the Chronicles of Time, the 3 that followed Raistlin and Cameron or
Mhm.
Carmen, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
it followed the 3 that I stopped reading it after book 2.
Oh.
I never finished it, and I have the trilogy box set for that
Mhm.
too, and I'm just like, "Oh, it's not as good as the other ones, why?"
Mm.
And but it's funny, I mean, those books, even though they're not all related, there are thousands. At least I feel like there's thousands. Like I walk in Second and Charles and there's like a whole like good section of
Mhm.
from like almost ceiling down that's nothing but Dragonlance, and I'm like, I'm in heaven. And but it's like, with those books, there are a lot of standalones that touch on
Mhm.
some of the characters. I'm actually still looking for Fizban's entire backstory currently, but I
Right.
haven't. I haven't. Sorry, I just totally sideswept with that. My bad.
That's okay.
I when I could find somebody that actually knows what Dragonlance is and understands it, it's like I found my people. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I read
Because
all those books. At least the big 3, the big 2 trilogies, the Chronicles and well, the original, the Dragons of Autumn Twilight, and then the Raceland and Caramon books.
yeah.
But yeah, there were hundreds of Dragonlance books, and Forgotten Realms, and
Yes.
I mean, Star Wars, Star Trek, all
Mhm.
these big IPs have tons of books because it's such an easy shared universe.
And it's funny because if I'm correct, Dragonlance is multiple writers.
Oh yeah, yeah. Weiss and Hickman wrote the core books, if you will, but a
Yeah.
ton of other people wrote a lot of other ones.
Yeah, and it's funny, I think I've seen what we had that cartoon adaptation with Kiefer Sutherland,
Uh-huh.
like, years ago, but
Yes.
it's never gotten the, uh, the love that I think it deserves.
Yeah, and I have not yet seen it. I know I need to, but the more recent D&D movie, Honor Among Thieves with Chris Pine, I hear it's very good and
It
a lot better
is.
than any previous ones they made. So
Yes.
maybe that will open the door to things like Dragonlance.
I'm hoping because I mean, truth be told, Dragonlance could kind of fall into the D&D realm, which
Yeah,
most people is like, "Oh, not really." I'm like, Yes, if you read the books truthfully how it is, they're really well detailed, but they could fall into like a campaign if you
yeah,
really
and
wanted to put them there."
flying my nerd flag here, but I played D&D for years, and you could get Dragonlance campaign settings and source
Mhm.
books and modules and all of that stuff.
I have them.
Oh, okay, okay, cool.
I actually I either packed up
Yeah,
because
mine too.
I'm afraid of them getting destroyed, but
Mm.
I just recently went like last year and I bought the starter kit, like the
Oh,
original
nice,
starter
nice.
kit,
Yes.
and it's still sitting in the plastic because my kids and my family, nobody will play with me, and I'm like,
Oh, man.
and the only person I knew that played D&D, I actually lost 2 days before my son's birthday last year,
Mm.
so I'm just like, heartbreak, because I was always trying to get in on his campaigns, and he was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, when we start the next one, we'll get you in on it." I'm like, "Okay," and then, like, their campaign just kept going and going, and I'm like, "It's
Oh,
fine, it's like a 30-year campaign, it's fine, I get
oh,
that."
wow.
You know? I mean, like, over exaggerating a little bit, but
Mhm,
it's I think they started it like 5 years ago, and it's just been continuously going, and I'm
mhm,
like, it's fine eventually." But it was funny because he used to be my downstairs neighbor,
mm,
and they would play every Tuesday night, and there was one of their friends that was super, super loud,
mhm.
and you would hear him all go, "Shh, there's a kid upstairs, shush," at, like, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. It was fantastic, and I
Yeah,
was just like, "Oh, that's so much fun. I miss doing that." I used to play Magic: The Gathering too, so
me too. I still have a bunch of my cards, but I don't play that often anymore, but yeah.
I don't play at all anymore. I have my deck. I even have all the cards my dad gave
I
me.
even have right here
Nice.
on my desk.
So I went to Warp Tour in 2015 and got handed random Magic: The Gathering cards at like
Wow.
a vendor there. They were like, "Oh yeah, we're giving out free cards." I was like, "Free Magic cards?" So excited. My sister's like, "You nerd. We're here for music." I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Shush. I'm okay with being a nerd. I like this. This is
Mhm.
my spot." But yeah, it totally just went sideways again. This is me. Hi, I have the brain of an 87-year-old squirrel, and when I find my people, I nerd out. It is what it
It's
is.
all good.
And but it's funny because I feel like a lot of us writers, we are nerds.
Mhm.
Like we're the people that are just like, okay, we can be dungeon masters and write out this complex scheme that can just mess with everybody. And it's like You know what? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and if you think about it, being a dungeon master or a game master in another game is it's just storytelling.
It is. And that's where, like, I my daughter, she likes to write, and
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why I got this the D&D starter set, 'cause I was like, "Look," I'm like, "We can create our own campaign, you can run it," and she's just like, "Absolutely not," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Why?" I'm like, "You're writing your own story on your own, but, like, why don't you just give this a shot?" And I don't know if it's just because she's too afraid that, it just won't be good enough. Because
Mhm.
I wrote a couple campaigns where I was just like, "Oh, yeah, no, this isn't good." And then you read people that I found a TikTok where a guy was like, "We've been running the same campaign for 10 years, and he's like, "Everyone's just, like, infinitely powerful." He was like, "Nothing could kill them." He was like, "I finally threw a boss their way, and it reset them to level 1 all over again, and now they have all the memories of
Mm.
the previous world, the previous life,
Uh-huh.
but they got dropped from level 100 all the way back down to level 1 with
Wow.
nothing and had to rebuild back up to fight that boss again." He was like, "So it's basically a game within a game. It's great." And I'm like, "10 years and you just basically hit the reset button?" Oh, I don't know how I would feel about that.
Me either, honestly. Wow.
I think I would be very, very mad. He was like, there was 2 envelopes. If they rolled a certain number, they picked one envelope where they beat the boss and it ended the game. It
Mhm.
ended 10 years of play. And then the other one is if they rolled like another I think it was like a D20. I forget the
Mhm.
number that they had to actually hit, but if they hit that number, then there was a second envelope that they had to pick. And that second envelope was that whole secondary world. And I'm like, I like stuff like that. I like the complexity of it.
Mhm.
But so coming back around again, trying to get this train back on the tracks and stop derailing it every so often. So Backfire comes out March 18th, but you have
Mhm.
another one called Bleeding into Winter coming out on June 25th. Is that a different series?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is in the mystery series. That is book number, 16 in the mystery series.
Oh wow. So this
Yeah.
one whole series.
Mhm.
Now, is it written the same way where you could just like pick it up and it's a totally different thing on its own?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, is that one available for pre-order or is that one gonna be available later?
It is available for pre-order. I use pre-orders partially as a scheduling and, deadline tool for myself.
Mhm.
So they tend to go up 6 to 7 months before the book comes out.
Okay.
Um, and, that's really allowed me to work on my process. I have not started the writing of Bleeding into Winter yet. I haven't. I won't start until, probably for another week or so.
So you're a fast writer.
5 or 6 weeks for a first draft.
Yeah.
There are people who publish, a book a month. I'm way slower than they are. But, yeah, I'd say I'm moderately fast.
I was about to say I actually my boyfriend kind of gave me a little bit of crap because I create my own schedule and I wrote A Realm of Wind and Rain in 16 days.
Nice. Wow.
And it was nonstop writing. We're
Mhm.
talking like my job, I'm a barber, and when
Mm.
we're slow, my
Mhm.
boss is like, "I don't care as long as you don't skimp on your duties, go ahead." And I tore out the book. I went you name it. I started it on August 19th and had it out for release by November 15th. And
That's
everybody was like,
impressive.
"What?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, I also had the really bad habit of editing while
Mm.
I was writing, so it's where I was like, it should have taken me a lot longer, but I also had about 25 people that were getting chapters
Mhm.
when I was done writing them, and they were honestly my biggest help because they were like, "Yo, hey, you missed this. Hey, you missed this." And then 2 of my friends, they're both English teachers, and they're like, "Hey, here.
Mhm.
We're gonna give you everything," and I'm just like, "I appreciate you guys so much." But
Nice.
that's actually honestly what helped me get through the
Mhm.
first book. But then I just saw recently that people were like, "Oh, if you write too many books or have too many books released in a year, that puts readers off." Like, what's your take on that?
I don't agree. I don't I think as long as your stories are good, readers don't really care. Um,
Yeah. So you think that's
and
just one random person's opinion that just stalked a
yeah, like I've seen like on threads and things like that recently that people are bagging on fast writers. Oh, how can you write good books if you write them fast? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451 in like 10 days, Maybe that's not the book for everyone, but it's a classic.
Yeah. I
just
mean,
just because if you're a full-time writer, which I am not,
mhm,
um, then you're probably writing, you're gonna be doing some emails and admin stuff and all of that, but you're probably gonna be writing for 4 hours a day.
mhm,
And if you've been doing this a long time, you can probably easily write 2,000 words an hour.
yeah.
Faster if you dictate. I've never gotten the hang of dictation, but people
I
do, and
can't.
yeah, I can't do it either.
Yeah,
So
I think oh, go ahead.
you could very easily generate 6 to 8,000 words a day. And if let's say 80,000 words is a novel, that's a novel in
Mhm.
what, 10 days?
Yep. So it's funny because I think you and I are remotely from the same area, so we both have quote the same accent that because Siri loves to tell me that my that I can't understand what I'm saying. I
Hmm,
actually had one dictation tool say it couldn't understand my accent, and I went, I don't have one.
right.
'Cause I was like, "I'm originally from Maryland," and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't have an accent. What are you talking about accent? I do not have one." And my boyfriend will say, he was like, "No, some stuff you say, you have an accent." I'm like, No." But, I hear myself talk all the time, so I'm just like, "Yeah,
Right.
no, I
Yeah.
don't." But, um, so, yeah, with dictation, I haven't, but I was always wondering what other people's thoughts are on that because it is, like you said, it's on Threads right now. It's all over where
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh, fast writers this." Like, stop bashing on people. And
Right.
then, same with readers. I mean, you're not gonna bash a reader for reading your book in less than 24 hours if they like it.
Right.
So, so with these books, are these, like, going to be like, just a blip in the map of the continuation of your series, or are you gonna be closing them out soon, or
I don't have any plans to wrap up either one.
Nice. Well,
So
do you have, like, uh I know the one's got 16 books already. So, do you have, like, a goal of how many books you're trying to get to for that series?
no, not really.
Nice.
You know, it tends to be like, the Jack Reacher series is open-ended.
Okay.
The Spencer series, I think Parker wrote 40 or 41 before he died, and there's been another 11 or 12 more since then.
Holy crap,
So,
that's a
yeah,
lot.
so it's over 50.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like in the genre, the concept of the open-ended series is definitely a thing.
Hmm,
I know other genres are more focused on things like trilogies and more fixed length
yeah.
series, but like mystery and thriller, every book is essentially a new story or a new case or whatever. So
So it could essentially
it
just be like the never ending story.
pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that was actually one of the biggest things. So, one of the last things, because I know we are getting kind of close on time. Would be your like number one piece of advice for upcoming authors, indie authors, or just authors that might be struggling?
Especially for indie authors, I would say know why you want to do it. If you want to just see your book on Amazon, that's different than you want to make a certain amount of money, or you want to become a full-time author one day, or
Hmm.
you want to tell your grandmother's life story because it's particularly inspirational. Those are all fine goals, but they're very different.
Hmm.
And how you do things and what you do and how much money you spend and things like that are going to depend on what you want to get out of it. It there are a lot of people who I'd say are, full-time authors or maybe successful part-time authors who kind of sneer at hobbyists. And it's like, look, not everybody wants to sink a lot of time into it. If people just want to publish a book a year or so and say, look, I wrote a book, here it is, good for them.
Yeah.
A lot of people start writing books. Most people don't finish it. And if you
Yeah.
can finish it and you can put it in a position where it's out in the world, man, good for you. Whether you want to be a bestseller or not, that's something to cheer for.
Yeah.
So I would say, for indie authors in particular, know why you want to do it and, adjust your goals, your expectations, your financial commitment, because it's in many cases not free to do this,
Yeah.
based on why you want to do it. And for anyone in general, just keep plugging away. You can't edit a blank page, is the saying. So get like you were saying earlier, even if your 4 pages are bad, get your 4 pages done or whatever your goal is. Get them done. You can always fix them later.
Hmm.
But get the story moving. Keep it going.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably the best advice, and advice I wish I would have gotten when I started, because I was like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be easy. It's gonna be totally great," and then I'm like, "Oh, this is a lot of money, and this is a lot
It
of
can be.
like, holy crow!" And
Hmm.
it's funny because most people don't realize when they get into this that, you know, you get the fancy, "Oh, you can do this, you can do that," and then you get the sinkholes of you
Mhm.
reach out to these companies that you think are big time publishers, and then you learn that they're a hybrid. You get
Right.
that contract in your hand, and you're like, they want thousands of dollars from you over
Mhm.
a certain period of time, but your return from them
Right.
is like the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Plus also what they do for you is the bare minimum. And
Yeah.
I almost got scammed by that twice because I
It's
was like,
common.
"Oh, okay."
Because
Yeah.
if you Google, like, self-publishing or publishing companies, those are the companies that come up.
Mhm.
And,
I had one I had
pay
to
us
block.
yeah, pay us $10,000. You can publish a book for so much less than $10,000. And
Yeah.
as a general piece of advice to anyone listening, money should always flow to the author. Whether you are published yourself, whether you are published by Penguin Random House, whatever, money flows to you. If you have a publisher, the publisher gets the money and they send it to you. If you're an indie, you get it yourself. But money always comes to you. Yes, you might pay a cover artist, that's an expense. Yes, you might pay an editor, that's an expense. You're still getting the royalty money.
Mhm.
So if a company says, pay us X thousand dollars and we'll publish your book, no, no. And I think most hybrid presses are just vanity presses in nicer suits. They found a better term for themselves.
Yeah. Because I actually it's funny that you mentioned Penguin Random House. That's one of the ones that I had to block, and it was because it wasn't actually Penguin Random House.
Right.
They were a hybrid using the Penguin
Hmm.
logo and saying that they were a part of it. But I actually reached out. I went to the website, like Penguin Random House's actual website,
Hmm.
and I sent an email to them, and I was like, "Look," I was like, I just want to make sure this offer is legit. And I sent them the paperwork that I got. And
Hmm.
the lady who responded to me was fantastic. And she was like, "I'm so sorry, sweetie." She was like, "But you're being scammed." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Okay, well, thank you." And then I turned to Reddit. Honestly, I
Hmm.
turned to Reddit for a lot of information. I got into a couple of the indie author
Hmm.
Reddit plans, and I mean they were people that were really nice. I mean, they did use all caps when telling me do not spend money,
Right,
money
right.
flows to you. So yes, that is a great piece of advice. And then lastly, where can people find you?
TomFowlerWrites.com. That's TomFowlerWrites.com.
And social medias, they can find you on Instagram and Threads.
Yeah, I'm at Tom Fowler Writes pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for your time. And
Thank
then
you.
thank you for dealing with my random, like, nerdy derailment back there.
No, it's all
Um,
good.
and I had such a pleasure talking to you,
You too.
and thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was good to talk to you too.
Thank you. Well,
Thanks.
bye, everybody.